You have handed over control of your life to others for a very long time, without even realizing it. Every time you try to explain yourself to those who never intended to listen, every moment you let a judgmental glance or a thoughtless act disturb your inner peace, you are personally giving away a piece of your freedom. You carry loud battles within your mind where thoughts clash, bleed, and wear you down day by day, while the world outside coldly keeps on turning. You've been convinced that strength lies in reacting, in speaking up, and in proving your worth to everyone. But the truth is quite the opposite. True power does not reside in those reactions. It is not loud. It is not for show. It lies deep within you, steady, silent, and inviolable. Ancient Stoic philosophy drew a very clear line. No one can hurt you unless you give them the right to do so. And the moment you withhold a pointless comeback, the moment you guard your silence like a sacred territory, that is when you begin to reclaim your power. If you were tired of letting others dictate your emotions, if you long for a state of calm deep enough to stand firm amidst the chaos, then this is the place for you. Stay, hit subscribe, and become a part of Stoic journey, not as a spectator, but as someone beginning the journey of self-mastery. And then, you will realize something even more formidable than anything else. Silence is not weakness. It is a weapon, an invisible blade. But before you can wield it, you must realize that there is something far more valuable than words, a type of asset that you are still losing every single day. And once given away, you can almost never take it back. Part 1. Attention is a costly currency. The invisible asset that silently dictates the quality of your life is your attention. View it as the most expensive currency nature has bestowed upon us, far more ruthless than money. Lost money can be earned back, but a single moment surrendered to someone unworthy means that time, that energy, and that peace have left your life forever. Every scowl over an insult, every explanation to someone who willfully misunderstands, every retaliatory text typed in anger, these are all losing trades. You are withdrawing from your own peace fund to pay for someone else's chaos. Think about it. How many times has a stranger's malicious comment or a colleague's petty attitude been enough to ruin your entire evening? It's not because they are that powerful. It's because you unconsciously granted them entry into your mind. They only threw a spark. It was you who used your own stillness as firewood to let it burn. The cold truth is that aggressors do not thrive on inner strength. They survive by feeding off the attention, reactions, and agitation of others. Paradoxically, we know how to lock our doors, guard our wallets, and protect our physical assets with great care. Yet we leave the gates of our minds wide open for anyone to walk in and trample on our focus. Therefore, mindfulness doesn't mean becoming emotionless. It means becoming a rigorous investor of your own life energy. You must know where is worthy of your full presence, your goals, your growth, your peace, and the people who truly cherish your value. The core lesson has never been about how to strike back more sharply, but about the ability to pause before reacting. Next time provocation finds you, let a simple yet fierce question ring in your head. Is this worth the price of my own serenity? That single beat of hesitation is enough to shift the entire balance of power. Choosing not to respond is not cowardice. It is the privilege of someone whose emotions are no longer for sale. You withdraw your attention. You close the transaction. You leave the provoker isolated in the very void they created. But then a bigger question arises. How do you ensure that silence doesn't become a simmering suppression, but instead transforms into a cold, bright, and inviolable shield? The answer lies not in hiding your feelings, but in building an inner strength far deeper than emotion itself. Part 2. The power of silence and disregard. That profound power lies in an ability most people never master: silence at the right time. When someone hurls a taunt, a judgment, or a deliberate provocation, what they truly want is not the truth. It's a reaction. They want to pull you into their emotional whirlpool, wanting to see you waver so they can feel significant. Instinctively, we often fall into that trap. We want to snap back to prove we're right, to counterattack, to maintain a sense of control. But the moment you rush to speak, you have stepped onto their playground and accepted the rules they designed from the start. On the contrary, when you choose silence, you are not weak. You are cutting off the lifeblood of that game. Imagine a tense meeting or a debate where someone suddenly shifts from logic to personal attacks. If you immediately flush red, make excuses, or raise your voice to regain the upper hand, you are dragged down to the level of impulsivity. But if you simply look at them, calm and unhurried, letting those words fall without creating a single ripple inside you, the situation changes. Your silence becomes a cold mirror, and in that mirror, the one losing control is no longer you, but the person who just tried to hurt you. Humans crave feedback. Their ego lives on friction, on signals that they have touched someone else. Therefore, when you refuse to react, you not only preserve your peace, but also push the aggressor into a very uncomfortable vacuum. There, they have nothing to cling to except their own pettiness. This is why disregard is sometimes more jarring than a sharp retort. Words can fuel a conflict, but timely silence causes the war to die from a lack of fuel. However, true disregard is not gritting your teeth in endurance while boiling inside. It is not suppression. It is a form of disciplined indifference. You step back far enough to see the nature of the provocation and realize it isn't worth a single drop of your energy. You begin to establish a rigorous filter for your mind. What brings no value is not worthy of passing through that gate. And when that filter is strong enough, external noise no longer has the power to invade as it once did. Silence and disregard, when used correctly, create a strange authority, unpretentious, non-threatening, yet forcing others to feel the distance between them and you. However, silence alone is not enough to become invincible. For if you are always present, always ready to be seen, touched, and tested, then over time, even that stillness can be taken for granted. And that is when you must learn a higher level of power, knowing exactly when to retreat, to disappear, and to leave behind a space that not everyone has the right to touch. Part 3. The art of strategic retreat, the power of absence. Your presence, if distributed too easily, will sooner or later lose its weight. Look at the person who always replies to messages instantly, who is always there whenever others need them, who nods at every request, no matter how unreasonable. Initially, this might be called enthusiasm, dedication, or kindness. But very quickly, it becomes taken for granted. And once your presence is seen as an entitlement, respect begins to fade. For the cold truth of life is this: value is rarely created from abundance. It is most deeply felt when it is finite. Strategic retreat is not running away. It is the ability to step back at the right moment to protect your own worth. You don't disappear out of fear, but because you understand that not every call deserves your presence. When you stop meeting every irrational expectation, When you stop being there by default, others are forced to face the void you leave behind. And in that very void, they begin to realize what they previously failed to appreciate. You are not cheap. Intentional absence creates an invisible gravity. It requires no threats, no warnings, yet it is enough to establish boundaries. This is also how you teach the world how to treat you. Not through anger, not through fierce declarations, but by ceasing to give yourself away unconditionally. You turn access into a privilege rather than something others can take whenever they please. And from there, your presence regains its value. To achieve this, you must cultivate a cold discipline. Next time an interruption cuts into your plans or a manipulative phone call rings, do not reflexively answer. Do not rush to agree just because you fear disappointing others. Let a pause emerge. That very delay is the signal that you no longer live by the rhythm of others' demands. Choosing not to engage in meaningless meetings, not to respond to every signal, not to show up everywhere just to be remembered, is not being cold-hearted. It is how you restore dignity to your time, your energy, and your focus. However, this stepping back only works as a warning for relationships that are still capable of adjustment. For those who live by manipulation, negativity, and depletion, distance is sometimes not enough. There are presences that don't just exhaust you. They silently poison your inner life every day. In those cases, retreat is no longer a strategy. It becomes a verdict, a silent, decisive, and necessary amputation to preserve your innermost core. Part 4. Quietly eliminating the unworthy. The harshest sentence for toxic people is never a loud argument nor a dramatic expose. The coldest, most definitive punishment is to quietly erase them from your reality. No debate, no explanation. Leave no door ajar for them to step into your mental life ever again. Some people enter your life not to accompany you, but to drain you. They plant belittling remarks disguised as advice, drag you into whirlpools of grievance, and silently suck your attention to patch up their own internal brokenness. Many times, you've exhausted yourself trying to change them, trying to make them understand, or trying to maintain a bond simply because you fear being seen as cold. But the truth is, protecting your own life force is not selfish. It is survival discipline. You cannot keep pouring water for others from an empty jar. The greatest mistake is believing that dialogue will always open an exit for everyone. For minds accustomed to manipulation, your every explanation only becomes new material for them to twist, exploit, and turn back against you. There are chess games that cannot be won by playing better. They can only be won when you stand up and leave the table. Therefore, when someone repeatedly brings negativity, chaos, and exhaustion into your life, you don't need a declaration of war. You simply need to start shrinking their presence in your world. Fewer responses, less openness, fewer opportunities. Until that connection dies on its own for lack of anything to cling to. This is the art of starving manipulation. People who live off the reactions of others lose their way when there are no emotions left to harvest. When you stop providing attention, stop giving away energy, stop being the dumping ground for their chaos, they will gradually drift out of your orbit. The space they leave behind is not a loss. It is clarity. It is the feeling of a mind finally being able to breathe. It is the moment you realize you aren't lonelier for letting go of the wrong people. You are simply lighter, making room for the right things. But even when you have cleared the external noise, the greatest battle is not over. For the most dangerous source of chaos doesn't always come from others. Sometimes it rises from within. A bruised ego, a fear of abandonment, a simmering anger waiting for the moment to flare up and seize control. And that is when you understand. Eliminating toxic external factors is only the first step. To become truly invincible, you must forge an invisible armor within, one that can extinguish chaos the moment it catches fire. Part 5. Donning the emotional armor and calculated stillness. When the external noise is blocked, the real battle begins to reveal itself. It takes place inside you. It is not anyone else but your own bruised ego, the fear of being looked down upon, or a flash of instant rage that are the doors the world constantly tries to kick open to invade your peace. An invincible person is not someone without emotions. They still feel hurt. They still sense indignation. They still hear the ripples of agitation within. But the difference lies here. They do not kneel before those impulses. They learn to wear an invisible armor, not to deny emotion, but to watch it pass by without letting it take the wheel. A single malicious remark aimed at the achievements you've spent your life building, or an irrational suppression in a competitive environment, your inner instinct immediately goads you to strike back. It wants you to speak up. It wants you to prove them wrong. It wants you to return the pain with equal force. But the moment you let anger borrow your voice, you have opened the city gates from the inside. True mindfulness lies in a much harder faculty, looking directly at the rising wave, naming it, feeling its presence, and still refusing to let it dictate your actions. When you master this, you touch a form of power very few possess: calculated stillness. We often think power must accompany action, counterattacks, and aggressive moves to regain the initiative. But on many of life's chessboards, the strongest move is the refusal to move. Not because you are helpless, but because you are wise enough to realize that not every provocation deserves to be turned into a war. When someone deliberately sets an emotional trap, they don't want the truth. They want your reaction. When you stand still, refusing to be pulled away, the trap instantly loses its power. You force the manipulator to face the very chaos they created, while you remain unmoved. That is why, sometimes, doing nothing is the most authoritative form of resistance. Every pause before an impulse, every time you restrain the need to prove, to explain, or to win in the eyes of others, is another layer of concrete poured into your inner foundation. That composure is not passive. It is discipline. It is the grit of someone who understands that not every knock on the door is worth opening, and not every fire is worth stepping into to extinguish. Part 6. Freedom from the need to prove yourself. The invisible shackles tightening around your inner life sometimes don't come from the world's attacks, but from a silent hunger within. The need to prove your worth and the craving to be understood. It is this hunger that keeps people in a state of permanent exhaustion. We explain to be seen correctly. We plead to avoid being misunderstood. We struggle to protect our image before eyes that never truly intended to understand. In each of these instances, we don't reclaim dignity as we imagine. We only hand more power to others to dictate our peace. Think of the moment a rumor reaches your ears, or when someone looks at the results you sacrificed so much to build and dismisses them with a shallow judgment. The first reflex is almost always to speak up. You want to correct the narrative, to clarify, to pull them back to the truth so they can see you fairly. But the cold reality is, many people are not looking for the truth. They are only looking for a version of the story that makes them feel comfortable or satisfies their prejudices. If so, every effort to explain is just pouring energy into a door that was never open. You must remember one vital thing. You do not owe the world an explanation for how you live. You are under no obligation to make everyone understand your choices, your wounds, your journey, or your silence. The first and most important person who needs to understand that path is you. When you stop rushing to justify yourself, stop being defensive, and stop letting every external gaze drag you into an endless trial, you begin to hear your own true voice more clearly. That is where freedom begins. Ultimate strength is not in how many people you can out-argue, but in the ability to be calm while others misunderstand you without dropping your inner value. Next time you face an unfair judgment from a colleague, an old friend, or anyone who thinks they have the right to define you, do not rush to pick up your phone and write a long explanation. Put it down. Hold back the justification rising in your throat. Let that silence do something difficult but necessary. Starve the hunger for validation that is rooted within you. Part 7. Becoming the silent observer of your own life. That powerful title is The Silent Observer Amidst the Chaotic Flow of Life. Most people live as victims caught in dramatic spectacles, or as gladiators always ready to jump into every battle staged by others. But when you learn to step back, you are no longer the victim, nor the one who reacts wherever provoked. You step off the stage, and from that moment, the entire situation shifts. Being a silent observer is not escaping reality. It is viewing reality from a higher vantage point. Imagine a moment when your abilities are belittled in a crowd, or an old acquaintance suddenly hurls bitter insults at you. Natural instinct will drive you to retaliate, to win, to reclaim honor, to prove you aren't weak. But what if, at that very heat, you choose to stand still? What if, instead of getting stuck on the surface of the insult, you look through it? From the observer's position, you will see what anger previously hid from you. Behind those attacks is usually not strength, but insecurity, self-doubt, and a hunger for attention from the other person. This is also when you begin to understand a deeper truth. Often, what agitates us about others doesn't just speak about them, it reveals something within us. A slight that makes you angry might touch an unhealed wound. A denial that makes you lose control might be hitting a fear of being seen as worthless. Thus, when you refuse to react immediately, you don't just avoid someone else's trap, you gain the chance to see your own internal structure. That is where true growth begins. The core lesson here is the art of detaching yourself from the swirling current. When provocation finds you, do not let your mind dissolve into it. Step back in silence, as if standing on the bank watching murky water flow by. You see the emotion rising. You see the trap opening. You see exactly where the other person is trying to touch you. But you do not step down. That refusal to step down is power. That distance preserves your energy, your clarity, and keeps your inner self from being dragged away by things that were never worthy. The silent observer is not an emotionless person. On the contrary, they feel everything deeply. But they no longer live as a slave to those feelings. That stillness does not make you weaker. It makes you more untouchable than ever. And once you reach this level, you will realize that everything you've learned, from silence, disregard, retreat, cutting ties, and letting go of the need to prove, is ultimately leading you to a final vow, a principle of living strong enough to hold your inner kingdom steady amidst all the upheavals of human life. That final vow will lead you to a state that almost everyone craves, yet very few possess the grit to hold: the state of invincibility. Many mistakenly believe that being unbeatable is measured by status, by dominating an argument, or by sharp rebuttals that crush an opponent. But true power has never been that loud. Ultimate strength is always silent. It resides in the moment you refuse to be pulled away. It lives in the times you restrain an impulse, decline a meaningless reaction, and maintain your internal sovereignty while the world outside is in chaos. Every time you choose not to react to cheap provocation, every time you turn your back on an unworthy battle, you lose nothing. On the contrary, that is when you are silently rebuilding the foundation of your life. Every pause, every silence, every decision not to let your emotions be bought cheaply, all of these are pouring concrete for a calmer, more focused, and more stable existence. In highly competitive environments, amidst relationships tangled with calculation, the strongest person is not the one who makes the most noise. It is the one who can walk through the eye of the storm without letting that storm enter them. You are not avoiding reality. You are simply no longer granting reality the right to mold your emotions. And that is the difference between living passively and truly mastering your life. For this journey has never been just about learning to stay silent in an argument. It is about learning to transform stillness from a fleeting reflex into a state of being. Once you stop distributing fragments of your soul to invisible battles, you will preserve your vitality, your clarity, and your own direction. From then on, you are no longer a pawn pushed by circumstances. You become the one who sets the rules for your own game. Now, stillness is your weapon. Disregard has become your shield, and the energy you preserve is the invisible crown that no one can snatch from your hands, unless you give it away yourself. Carry that composure into tomorrow. Protect your inner boundaries like a sacred land that no one has the right to trespass. If what was shared today resonated with you, stay with Stoic Journey by subscribing, liking, and sharing. Leave a comment below, not to impress anyone, but as a confirmation to yourself. From today, you will no longer live by reaction. The journey to forge an unbreakable mind continues here. Choose the next video on your screen and continue to step deeper into the art of self-mastery. Remember this: the greatest power always belongs to the one who maintains their stillness.